Alkahf, the cave, is chapter 18 in the Quran. This Meccan chapter tells 4 unique stories. Each deals with a different type of fitna, or test from Allah. The first story is about the people of the cave. Their faith was tested by Allah, as they were surrounded by a pagan society that worshipped idols. The second story deals with the fitna of wealth. It's about a man who Allah blessed with wealth, but was arrogant and ungrateful to Allah. The third story deals with the fitna of knowledge. Allah sent Prophet Moses, peace be upon him, on a journey to show him that he wasn't as knowledgeable as he thought he was. The fourth and final story deals with the fitna of power. It's a story about Zulqarnain, a just ruler who was not corrupted by the power Allah blessed him with. Now let's take a look at each of these stories in more detail. So who are the people of the cave? They were a group of young believers who believed in Allah and worshipped Him alone. They held firmly to their faith at a time when everyone around them was worshipping idols and far away from the straight path. They began preaching to the people, urging them to return to Allah's path and to worship Him alone. But they were mocked and ridiculed for doing so. However, their faith in Allah never wavered, even as they became more isolated in their own community. Allah would then inspire them to seek refuge in a cave away from their corrupt village. So they took their dog and left their homes and comfortable lives behind and went to live in this cave. وَإِذِ اعْتَزَلْتُمُوهُمْ وَمَا يَعْبُدُونَ إِلَّا اللَّهَ فَأْوُوا إِلَى الْكَهْفِ يَنْشُرْ لَكُمْ رَبُّكُمْ مِنْ رَحْمَتِهِ وَيُهَيِّئْ لَكُمْ مِنْ أَمْرِكُمْ مِرْفَقًا. Since you have distanced yourselves from them and what they worship besides God, take refuge in the cave. Your Lord will extend His mercy to you and accommodate you in your ordeal. It is in this cave that Allah would bless them with great miracles, one of them being that they would sleep for 309 years. During that long period of time, Allah would protect them from the heat of the sun, turning their bodies away from the sunlight. He would also circulate air inside the cave so they can breathe. When they finally woke up, they asked each other, "How long have we been sleeping for?" "Maybe a day or part of a day," one replied. Hungry for food, one of them took some of their money and returned to the village to get something to eat. When he arrived there, he was stunned to find an entirely different village. The people of their village were now believers and were worshipping Allah alone. He would come to realize that the money he brought with him to buy food was old and useless. They would then come to realize that Allah intervened to protect them at a time when everyone around them was corrupt and worshipping idols. Allah preserved their bodies and resurrected them when the people of their village were back on the straight path, worshipping Allah alone. We learn from their story that in the face of overwhelming corruption and misguidance all around you, if you stay firm on the straight path and hold on to your faith, Allah will always take care of you. The chapter then moves on to the next story that deals with the fitna of wealth. It's a story of a man that Allah blessed with 2 beautiful gardens and a river that flowed between them. And even though he became very wealthy, he was ungrateful to Allah and never acknowledged Allah's role in his prosperity. One day, he invited a friend who was less fortunate than him. He wanted to show off his wealth to this poor man, so he gave him a tour of his property, boasting that his land will never perish and that there is no day of judgment. His friend would challenge him, reminding him that Allah is the one who created him from dust and made him into the man he is today. "If only you had said when you entered your property, 'This is what God has willed,' there is no power except with God," said the poor man. But the wealthy man's arrogance would soon doom him, as Allah would go on to destroy his gardens and crops, leaving him with nothing. Allah would then remind us that this world is temporary, and regardless of how blessed we are, nothing comes close to the everlasting reward of the afterlife. المال والبنون زينة الحياة الدنيا والباقيات الصالحات خير عند ربك ثوابا وخير أملا. Wealth and children are the adornment of this worldly life, but the everlasting good deeds are far better with your Lord in reward and in hope. The chapter then moves on to the third story that deals with the fitna of knowledge, and that's the story of Prophet Moses, peace be upon him, and Al-Khidr, A man came to Moses one day and asked, "Who is the most knowledgeable person on earth?" "That would be me," Moses responded. So God revealed to Moses that he was wrong to say that, and there was in fact someone who is more knowledgeable than him. God instructed him to go meet this man, whose name is Al-Khidr, and that he will find him where the two seas meet. So Moses, peace be upon him, took his young servant and set out on this long journey and eventually found the right spot. فَوَجَدَ عَبْدًا مِّنْ عِبَادِنَا آتَيْنَاهُ رَحْمَةً مِّنْ عِنْدِنَا وَعَلَّمْنَاهُ مِنْ لَدُنَّا عِلْمًا. There they found a servant of ours, to whom we have granted mercy from us, and enlightened with knowledge of our own. Moses says to him, "May I follow you, and perhaps you can teach me some of the guidance you've been taught?" "You won't be patient enough with me," said Al-Khidr. "And how could you be patient with what is beyond your realm of knowledge?" Moses responded, "You will find me patient, God willing, and I will not disobey any of your orders. Then if you follow me, do not question me about anything until I myself clarify it for you." So they set out on this journey together, and they board a ship. On the ship, Al-Khidr starts damaging the ship, making a hole in it. "What are you doing?" said Moses, peace be upon him. "Are you trying to drown the people of this ship? You've done a terrible thing." "Did I not say that you cannot have patience with me?" Al-Khidr replied. Moses pleaded, "Excuse me for forgetting, and do not be hard on me." So they proceeded on their journey until they came across this boy, and Al-Khidr kills him. Moses protested and said, "Have you killed an innocent soul who killed no one? You have certainly done a horrible thing." Al-Khidr answered, "Did I not tell you that you cannot have patience with me?" Moses replied, "If I ever question you about anything after this, then do not keep me in your company, for by then I would have given you enough of an excuse." So they moved on until they came to a town, and they asked its people for food, but they refused. Moses and Al-Khidr would continue until they came to this wall that was about to collapse. Al-Khidr would rebuild the wall to save it from collapsing. "You know you could have demanded them to pay you a fee for fixing their wall for them," Moses told Al-Khidr. Al-Khidr replied, "This is the parting of our ways. I will now explain to you what you could not bear patiently. As for the ship, it belonged to some poor people working at sea. So I damaged it, for there was a tyrant king ahead of them who seizes every good ship by force. And as for the boy, his parents were true believers, and we feared that he would pressure them into defiance and disbelief. So we hoped that their Lord would give them another, more virtuous and caring one in his place. And as for the wall, it belonged to 2 orphan boys in the city, and under this wall was a treasure that belonged to them, and their father was a righteous man. So your Lord willed that these children should come of age and be able to retrieve their treasure, as a mercy from your Lord. I did not do it all on my own." This is the explanation of what you could not bear patiently. Allah wanted to teach Moses a lesson that we do not always have the knowledge of why God allows certain things to happen, things that may appear to be bad as it unfolds, but in reality, it's for a good reason. Now we come to the final story of this chapter, which deals with the fitna of power. It's the story of Zulqarnain, known as the man of the 2 horns. He was a righteous king who traveled far and wide. He was an honorable and just ruler, whom Allah blessed with vast land and tremendous power. إِنَّا مَكَّنَّا لَهُ فِي الْأَرْضِ وَآتَيْنَاهُ مِنْ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ سَبَبًا. Surely we established him in the land, and gave him the means to all things. So he set out on journeys to the far east and far west, where he helped guide people to the straight path, brought them prosperity, and ruled over them with justice. Then he traveled a 3rd course, حتى إذا بلغ بين السدين وجد من دونهما قوما لا يكادون يفقهون قولا. Until he reached the pass between 2 mountains, he found in front of them a people who could hardly understand his language. They pleaded with him to save them from Gog and Magog. Gog and Magog were 2 neighboring peoples who violently raided their village and spread corruption throughout the land. "Should we pay you tribute provided that you build a wall between us and them?" said the people to Zulqarnain. He responded, "What my Lord has provided for me is far better, but assist me with resources, and I will build a barrier between you and them." "Bring me blocks of iron," he asked the people. They would fill the gap between the two mountains with iron, making it red hot, and pouring molten copper over it, making it near impossible to climb or penetrate. فَمَا اسْطَاعُوا أَنْ يَظْهَرُوهُ وَمَا اسْتَطَاعُوا لَهُ نَقْبًا. And so the enemies can neither scale nor tunnel through it. He then declared to the people, "This is a mercy from my Lord. But when the promise of my Lord comes to pass, he will level it to the ground, and my Lord's promise is ever true." Meaning this wall won't last forever, and there will come a day when Allah will allow it to be leveled, and Gog and Magog will come through. وَتَرَكْنَا بَعْدَهُمْ يَوْمَئِذٍ يَمُوجُ فِي بَعْضٍ وَنُفِخَ فِي الصُّورِ فَجَمَعْنَاهُمْ جَمْعًا. On that day we will let them surge like waves over one another. Later the trumpet will be blown, and we will gather all people together. Yag and Magog's eventual coming out from behind this wall that Zulqarnain built is known to be one of the major signs of the final hour, right before the Day of Judgment. The story of Zulqarnain is a reminder that God will grant certain people power. What they do with this power is a test by Allah. Some will be corrupted by power, while others will use it for good. These 4 stories represent different ways Allah will test us in this world. It is encouraged that Muslims read this chapter every Friday to remind themselves of these trials and to protect themselves.